How much is AI going to change programming? And I ask because I see a discrepancy in productivity. Individually, I think it's making massive changes. I've got friends of mine who are career-long programmers and they're no longer writing code, but they're shipping more code, working code, than ever before. Personally, I've ticked off so many side projects and plugins and extensions and things that I've always wanted to build but never had the time to. It is a great time to be a builder or a tinkerer in this market. But at work, I don't think it's quite the same story. There's more noise in the enterprise about AI, but I haven't seen the same explosion of productivity. Why not? Maybe it's that AI can be trusted for side projects, but not for production code. Maybe coding faster doesn't actually help if the road to production is filled with lots of other bottlenecks. Maybe some companies aren't really doing it right. They're just pushing their staff to burn more tokens and not thinking beyond that. But somewhere there is a mismatch between the results we're seeing at home and the results we're seeing at work. Well, a few weeks back, I was asked to chair a panel at the conference XT26, and the topic was, how far can companies accelerate with AI? Companies specifically. And the answers from the 4 panelists were very interesting, very mixed. But if there was a consensus, it was that the current state of your company is probably going to predict your success with AI. If things are already a mess, AI has a real risk of making it worse. But one of the other things I took from hosting that panel was that I can't get 4 interesting people in a room and only give them an hour between them. I need more. So I'm trying to get all 4 of them to come in and join me on this podcast. My guest this week was the first to say yes. I'm joined this week by James Brown, who is an engineering lead at Schroders Asset Management. And I think that company specifically puts him at good vantage point. Asset management companies, hedge funds, places like that, they often have all the regulation and organizational headaches that banks get, but they're mixed with those move quickly, be the first to market opportunities that you see at startups. It is a good ground zero case study for the AI explosion. And talking with James, we talk about how Claude Mania has grabbed him and put him at risk of burnout, how it's got him building a new system for context management for agents that reminds me quite a lot of the way human beings learn about a code base. We talk about how developers will have to change mindset going forwards and how teams will need to change their organization. And we talk about the near future. What's going to happen a few years from now if we aren't training junior developers anymore? And what are the risks to our careers if our managers are bluffing their way through the revolution? Sometimes opportunity knocks, and sometimes it brings a battering ram. Will your career and your company be able to cope? I'm your host, Chris Jenkins. This is Developer Voices, and today's voice is James Brown. Joining me today is James Brown of Schroders. James, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. I think we're both surviving the heat in the UK today. We're hitting record temperatures, right?
Yeah, it's hot again. I mean, I quite like it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yes, unusually hot again.
I'm a child made for the winter. I much prefer it. But speaking of things that are hotting up, how's that for a link? AI in the world, which is the hot topic of the day, and something you're experiencing both at the coalface and the corporate level. So I thought we'd get you in to chat about it. Why don't we start with your experience with things like Claude? Because I think you had a similar one to me in that last year. You were wondering if this was all hype, but things changed.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think this is felt by a lot of people that I know in my sort of circle and where I work and the previous companies I've worked, is there was a long period of time where the hype seemed to be outstripping the reality. And for those kind of more sort of scientific analytical people, we're kind of watching and reading the rhetoric and looking for the numbers, and things weren't adding up. But there was a specific point in time for me where I realised that this is not just here to stay. This is a big deal. Everything is going to change. And for me personally, it was about the back end of 2025.
Okay.
Sort of, maybe autumn, winter, and Claude was kind of gaining some traction. I tried a whole bunch of AI tools, and I thought, I've got hundreds of unfinished personal projects, as a lot of us do. Libraries. Been working on this this artificial life simulator for 20 years, and I thought, okay, Claude, show me what you can do.
Yeah.
And, I'd been learning kind of, it wasn't just kind of, I was more than one-shotting at the time. I was exploring proper sustainable AI engineering practices. And I thought, I picked it up at home and I thought, well, okay, let's throw it at my biggest project, the toughest one, the one that is always like the measure of what I can and can't do.
Right.
And what happened was nothing short of like what I call Claude Mania. I just, not only did I smash all of my previous goals with my personal project in days, but I couldn't put it down. It was almost like, it was addictive.
Yeah.
I kept throwing it one more feature, one more thing to do, one more improvement, one more, millisecond of performance. And it went on for a few months, and I would have multiple projects on the go, multiple terminals, agents running, switching backwards and forwards. For the first time in a long time, I went back to that, stage that I did when I was very young in my career, where, I'd be up till 3 a.m. coding still.
Yeah.
And, this went on, and there was a point in time coming towards Christmas, and I thought, I think we were out of milk and eggs. And I thought, get out of your little cave, go outside and get some milk and eggs, right?
Right.
And so I did. I kind of crawled out of my little basement flat. There's sun burning me because I hadn't seen daylight for months,
Like a Morlock in the H.G. Wells story.
exactly like a Morlock. That's exactly how I felt, right? I was kind of hunched over and the sun was bearing down. And I'm walking to the shop, and all of a sudden I felt this wave of anxiety. And I was like, what is that? And I realised I hadn't left like an agent or a session running at home doing something. And I realised this anxiety was like, oh my God, you're literally, you've got, think of all the people who have got a session running at home that's starting up a new, unicorn startup, or solving a problem or a disease. And I'm just, what a loser. I'm just a single-threaded man kind of hunched over plodding to the shops. And I actually still get this today. So obviously that was the beginning of using AI all day, every day. But if I leave work and I haven't kicked off a bunch of agents to do stuff while I'm away, I feel like I've kind of, made a mistake or missed out.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I can imagine saying that in like 2024 and it sounding ridiculous, but I really know what you mean. Like, I will often leave things to cook overnight so that I've got something done when I wake up in the morning, right?
Yeah, it just feels like you're missing out on some level of productivity. I think we've all been given this ability to be productive 24 hours a day.
That is a blessing and a curse. Is that translating into work where you're expected to be productive 24 hours a day?
No, I mean, I think they're still trying to work out, what's safe and sustainable as well, because that kind of Claude Mania wasn't really sustainable. It wasn't a healthy thing to do. And I think you'll have experienced this, and I have a lot of friends who are more burnt out than ever, right? Especially cognitively.
Yes.
So I think there's going to be unsustainable, practices before we work out what a sustainable and healthy, 24/7 agentic world really looks like.
I have to ask you, of all those old projects you picked up, right? How many of them are now like complete, still useful, you're still working on, and how many were like part of the excitement but died?
Yeah. So did it change the fact that I can't finish a project? Is that what you're
Yeah, did it actually produce external results, or did you just get busy and noodling?
Well, I mean, at work, I've finished, significant things, right? At home projects, it's always best effort. But I feel like I could finish them. I feel like I could.
Yeah, well,
But
you reach the point sometimes where, especially when you've got kids, the amount of spare time diminishes to almost nothing, and you don't have even a feeling, a smidgen of power.
Yeah, you don't control how much time is available, nor would I want to edge out the unpredictable sort of demand for doing that kind of family stuff. So I really feel like I could finish some home projects now, but maybe that's just reflective of a lot of the, the productivity in AI is everyone feels more productive. But when you actually start reaching for any kind of evidence, it is still quite tricky.
Yeah, I sort of feel like, personally, the evidence of being more productive, for getting more things done, is undeniable. And probably the things I've released, there are more of those. And yet, what is it I'm grasping at? That I don't quite feel, firstly, I don't quite feel that there's been a revolution in the valuable things to the world I've delivered. Mostly it's me noodling. And I'm not convinced it's entirely translated to the corporate world.
No, I mean, I think there's still a lot more to actually delivering software than finishing a project or the code. And I know this through professional terms. For a lot of the things I'm building, that you build it because you want someone to use it, right? They either not necessarily buy it, but if it's an open source project, you want people to fork it, download it, use it, feedback, contribute, right? And I've been involved in a number of both professionally and private sort of open source projects, and all the complexity was about getting engagement. So talking to people, sharing people, getting them excited about it. So unless you're using, and I'm sure you can use AI to help you with that, but I think that's still there. Like, I think if I could finish my, I've got an open source thing I'm working on now, which is for trying to give like proximal awareness or sort of agent proximity alerts to multi-agent things. Unless I actually go out and get people interested in it and join in and try it, and that it's still always just going to be a GitHub repo with one user, myself.
Yeah.
Even if I would declare it, complete.
I'm going to pull on that thread, partly because we've got a perfect platform to let people know about this thing that you think is interesting. But what's a proximal awareness system? What are you trying to build on there?
Yes, so it's it's called Clair,
right?
And that might be because it's short for clairvoyance. Now
right.
let's take a hypothesis, and I don't necessarily believe this hypothesis is true. It might be validated. Let's take a hypothesis that we are now going to have a world where repositories, single repositories, especially for companies that have large mono repos, maybe like Google, maybe they'll pick this up and it will change the way they work. We'll have at any one time many agents working on more than we ever used to, right?
Yeah.
Within the same repo. Now, at the moment, obviously, what happens typically is somebody orchestrates the work, and you try to divide up the work to the agents in a way that they're not going to cause merge conflicts. So, like you wouldn't set 10 feature agents off and an agent that's going to refactor the auth flow and an agent that's going to upgrade all of your out-of-date libraries. Like they're all going to come up with a horrendous merge conflict, and then another agent has got to do something there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the idea is, what if you could give all of your agents some kind of skills are one of the big sort of successful things that were added to the ecosystem, and one of the reasons for that is because of their progressive disclosure. So they share a very little bit of what they can do to your context. And when you sort of trigger that you need to use that skill, then it pushes the detail into your context. Right? So what if we took that approach with agents doing live work? So the idea was that all of the agents would store like a little front matter about what files they're in, like the globs, and roughly what they're doing, and they would all be aware of that. And the way I've done that, because I wouldn't want a server, is the plugin has a shadow branch in Git. So the repo, essentially the GitHub or remote repo is the server. So they're as they're working, they're going to push these little kind of front matters of the proximity where they are and what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
And they're all aware of it, because the Clair plugin is going to constantly be looking at what the other agent is. It's in this file over here, and it's roughly working on auth. This one's over here, and it's working on this feature. And what it does is if it has a proximity alert. So if any two of them get close, a proximity alert is triggered, and the two agents get in touch through the same shadow branch and share what they're up to, right?
Right, yeah, because they're all working on separate branches, so they aren't going to immediately step on each other's toes, but in the future, they certainly will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a really smart idea.
And then the idea is, so all of I know this from experience, like building it is one thing, but building the measurement harness to prove it works is where all the work is. And so that's all I've built so far. It's because it's a very complicated thing to measure, is to set up the environment in which I think this provides value. So far it's a README and a measurement harness that tries to create this sort of the multi-agent doing multiple things and measuring the tokens used, the merge conflicts, the time, resolution time. So I just have a very sophisticated harness and an idea, and we'll see. I guess I will finish it off and share it maybe as a comment in this video. And I'm sure somebody will tell me, "Oh, we've tried that and it doesn't work," but it's fun.
I suspect you'll find that a few people are trying it at the moment, and they all have slightly different designs to yours, and who will be right?
Yeah, there is a number of kind of agent to agent sort of context sharing things out there, and I think my sort of take on it was using the progressive disclosure that was successful in skills, and using the shadow branches or orphan branches as the back end means that both people can pick it up without any infrastructure. And maybe the sort of the progressive disclosure of the proximity system is something that's worked. I mean, it's the testing harness is the thing that flushes this out.
Yeah. You're going to burn some serious tokens actually running tests on this. But
yeah,
the thing this makes me think of is the reason you would need something like that is traditionally the way we've discovered this, that I'm working on the auth system and some other guy on the team is working on the user account page, right? And they're going to clash. And the way it works usually is I overhear them talking about it.
It's kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah. It's so that makes me think there is an exact analog between we're finding ways for agents to work that mirror the way humans have always sorted this stuff out, right?
Yeah, maybe that's a good thing to do, or maybe an anti-pattern to apply. But we're going to find out, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's exactly like you said. It's not just that. Is the person touching the auth system may not have initially been tasked to touch the auth system, but they had the hole in the bucket problem. If they went to fix a bug and then they found a bug within the bug, and the next thing you know, they're refactoring the entire auth system. So it's not like you can do it from the backlog, right? The backlog will probably not say they are upgrading React or they are in the auth system. It's almost like the merge point, depending on how the company is doing merges and branches, feels also too late. So maybe it's it's adding something in the middle.
Yeah. I've got to ask, explain this shadow branch mechanism to me. Is it like in the background constantly committing and pushing work in progress or something?
Yep. So from a sort of a Git technicality point of view, I'm not going to be your expert here,
Okay.
but I heard about its use in a few other libraries. So essentially, you could get the communication through remote Git, so no server. And I thought I'd take the same approach. I believe it uses like an orphan branch. Somebody in the comments in the video is going to have to give us the details.
Okay.
But it means it's a kind of an ephemeral branch on the Git remote, and you can use it for, the back-end communication, essentially.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah. And what, you're automating pushing to it, or it automatically does that?
Yeah, so the plugin only works for Claude at the moment, and it uses hooks. So it will...
Right.
So it will it maintains like a small summary of what it's up to, and it will periodically sort of push that up to the shadow branch. And the other plugins periodically kind of fetch, and then if there's something new, they'll pull it down. But it's only very small amounts of information, like to give like a positional awareness, really. So there's not a huge amount of extra traffic. If they need to get in touch, then that would be obviously a lot more sort of traffic across your remote repository.
Yeah,
and also the plan is there, right? Is probably because of where I work, but you would need to do kind of like a secure communication, like they need to share a key with each other, so that anything on the branch is not necessarily revealed to anyone who just has access to the repo. That's the other complexity. It's probably only something I have to solve because of where I work.
Yeah, working at a bank, you get these kind of enterprise-grade problems, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're good things to have, right? Because, I mean, something like that is a good thing to do anyway.
Yeah. That's... I wasn't expecting we'd talk about that if I didn't know you were working on it, but I can definitely see that because it's like, how is AI changing our structures, but how is it actually not changing our structures? And we're going to have to translate existing structures into the AI world. Right?
Yeah, and it's throwing up like so many cool new problems to solve, which is like what a lot of people sort of, I think, misclassify devs or as programmers or coders, but really we're problem solvers, and the computer is our favorite tool. That's how I've always felt like it.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm not on my own. A lot of friends of mine are building up. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he's building something that is trying to give long-term memory in a really interesting way, using a graph structure and sort of embedding in a really smart way. Everyone's kind of seeing these new problems as an opportunity to have a play around. And a great excuse to learn more about all of this new tooling.
And it's also a great excuse to maybe come away from the keyboard a bit and learn a bit more about the problems with human structures that you get in an organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's been a number of talks I've seen, and a lot of writing is about how AI is amplifying the existing, fire. I think I did a post the other day that a lot of people kind of, found quite amusing. It's like, if AI is almost like giving oxygen to a room of tiny fires. So a lot of these organizations where they've got all loads of tiny fires, right? The organizational structure isn't quite right, and they've got too much technical debt, and their funding model is wrong, and they're all tiny fires everywhere. And AI has come along, accelerated everything, and flooded the room with oxygen. And now it's almost like there's a catastrophic backdraft of that transformation you've been putting off for years. Maybe now you wish you had done it, or you should do it immediately. But yeah, I think certainly certainly we are seeing the distance, the sort of the communication distance between technology and people in the business needs to shorten now. Right, they need to be in proximity, like sitting next to each other, sort of as close as you can get to that, because this limiting factor isn't the speed that we can try ideas anymore. The limiting factor is actually the ideas coming through and the problems coming through in enough clarity so that we can throw ideas and products and technology at it. That's what I'm seeing.
I'm really interested in that because, like, you're right. The cost of getting an idea to at least a prototype, and cost in terms of money and in time, has massively gone down.
Yeah.
My experience of working for like banking size organizations, as you do, is that ideas often die on the vine because, even if it gets picked up, that's probably an 18-month project that might fail.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I guess the trap is for people to not realise that the cost of innovation has just taken a huge dip, and a lot of processes have been set up essentially to really heavily control innovation that maybe need to relax, just let more ideas flow, and you need to get better at the end of the feedback loop where you kind of like kill a lot of the ideas that aren't going to work and double down on the good ones a lot quicker.
So are you finding that in the real world, that you've got new ideas springing up and the system trying to push against it?
Yeah, I think that's natural, because these kind of organizational structures and the processes, the funding model is baked into it, everything, right? The culture, so it has ossified, I think, in all, before Schroders, I did some consultancy for 4 years. So I saw a lot of big corporations, worked in government for, 18 months. So these things are ossified, right? They are there. And the immune system is not going to rewire itself easily.
Yeah. Yeah. And often they're structures that sensibly existed when a project would take 18 months, could fail, and probably cost millions.
Yeah.
It's not going to suddenly readapt to the new constraints.
No, of course. I mean, like, to see, it's almost daily now, somebody will be kind of, debating over which feature they want to prioritize and what it should do and what it should look like. And, every now and then you can remind them, it's like, well, if, maybe do all of the ideas that you're thinking of and have a look at them. Especially if you do them in a sort of a proof of concept, you can, what should our UI look like? Well, let's try all of them and see which one the users like and throw the other ones away. It's not a big chunk of work anymore.
Yeah, that's now suddenly a sane strategy.
I think it was always a sane strategy, and I think the best companies were doing it. Yeah.
I think, like, when doing 5 versions of a UI would take 5 teams 6 weeks each, that was a crazy thing to do.
Yeah, I do, but no, I mean, they wouldn't do it that way before, would they? They would basically pull the wizard screen, right, and use slideware and whatever. But now potentially, you're right. You could literally have almost functioning, if not functioning, clickable versions of the variants.
Yeah, I think you can now. But so there is a tension there then, and it's probably one of the most important tensions in management right now. You're at home, like, speeding through all your side projects and your new ideas, probably being more productive than you've been in years as a home coder. Coming to the workplace, we know that should happen. The structures are fighting against it. But I, as someone answering to the shareholders up in management, have massive frustration that I'm not getting the gap between innovation I see in AI and innovation I see in my organization. And I would like to scream at someone or fire someone. What's your constructive suggestion instead for the way management should treat this stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we all know that everything has to change. In financially regulated companies, there is an acceptance that it needs to be a little bit slower. I think because this thing comes with just, huge amounts of extra unknown risk. We're not talking about known risk. We're talking about unknown risk that is flooding through this. But at the same point, we've rolled out AI tooling to everybody, Schroders, and we have great adoption, and it's going really well. And this kind of balance of how fast you kind of want to take and how much you want to slow down is both, a lot of something that we didn't expect we were going to need to do, not that long ago.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no. I think it makes sense to be one step behind for some companies, but it terrifies me to think of being two steps behind. I think it's a super linear scale. The gap between the companies that are going to learn how to do this well and the ones who are going to be behind is going to get big really quickly.
Yeah, and finding that midpoint, because when you're a bank dealing with a lot of money, you do have to be more cautious. But you say it's going really well. I want you to give me some details on that. What counts as AI going really well in an investment bank?
Yeah, I mean, so adoption's been great. I can't talk about specifics of what people are working on, but we measure token use, we measure adoption, we measure tool. We have people contributing significant parts of sort of AI components like skills actively across the organization. We have products that have been finished end to end with AI. And, we're exploring, how does this become a core part of a differentiator for clients as well. It definitely feels like, when we look out and we kind of explore the rest of the industry, we do feel like we're up there at exactly the right pace, I'd say.
Are you finding that you get more projects delivered faster? Because that's the real crux of this.
So we probably don't really have enough data. I would say that we're definitely seeing some projects come through really quickly.
I would have thought it's normally distributed, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's certain parts of the estate that we wouldn't touch yet. So, there's a lot of being cautious and careful of where you point this at, but where we are pointing it at and where we've got it right with the right people and the right tools, the right approach, bringing them closer to the business, we've seen phenomenal pace. We've seen things happen in weeks that would have been 6 months to a year, and like you said, just probably not viable.
Yeah. There are plenty of projects die that would work if they weren't so incredibly complex and slow and expensive to produce, right? The economics of producing software is completely changing. But you said, like, where we've got the right people and the right structures and stuff, what are those right? Like, what's your initial hypothesis of what works for approaching this?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's very easy and completely reasonable at this point in time to say I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
best guess?
Best guess, I think it's kind of the same as what we knew from before. I think they're, multi-skilled teams that can, both understand what the business needs, whether that's understanding the users and their problems or understanding how the business make money, combined with people who just love, because I think I've heard this before. I can't remember where I heard it. I'd like to attribute them, but there's kind of two kinds of different mindsets in engineering, right? There's the crafters and the builders. And
explain that distinction to me.
So the crafters really loved the language. They loved to really understand the programming language and the way the machine worked, and they weren't really super interested in what they were producing. They loved the craft, right? The perfection of the craft, right? And I know some of these people, and they're great. Right? They could always go deeper in a problem than I could. And then there are the builders, who really they're thinking about the thing they're going to hand over, right? Somebody's got a problem that they think is unsolvable, and because you know enough about how to program and software, you think I can solve that for them. And imagine their face when I hand it over.
Yeah.
And I've always been more of a builder than a crafter. I've been a bit of both, right? And I think the builders are having a really good time right now because they just need to be hooked up to somebody who's got a problem, someone to save. I've got a problem. How could we possibly solve this?
Yeah.
And the builder comes along, and now they can have that sort of that dopamine hit of solving their problem much quicker. Right? So you're pairing those with the people who understand the problem space or the user's needs or the business needs. I think that for a long period of time, teams are going to be small, maybe just 2 or 3 people like that.
Mm.
That's our guess.
The number of people you need, I think, is definitely going to go down. Do you think it's going to be about finding that right balance of personality types then to make a small, tightly performing team?
Yeah, and again, that wasn't really, that was the same problem as before, and ultimately, I don't think team sizes will change because of AI, right? Because good team sizes were constrained by communication limitations, right? Look at team topologies and small world networks, like the amount of people that you can have kind of like a close relationship with. So the 2 pizza sized team really comes out of a human limitation of how many people you can share a goal with. So I think it'll always hover around that number. 1 or 2 people is always very risky because obviously, your lottery number is too low. The number of people who could win a lottery, and all of a sudden you've got nobody operating that thing that's critical to your business. So I feel like 1 or 2 is too low, and I would say sort of 7 and up is too high. But I think they'll hover around the same number.
Does that mean, in your opinion, that we're going to find that the level of hiring remains roughly the same over time?
Well, who knows? I mean, it's surprising to me how little hiring there is going on right now, especially for younger people, which is obviously something we caught up on before. That's a worrying trend, right? And we've heard it from a lot of the major big software companies, and we've seen the numbers. And it's not just that there's layoffs, but recruitment, especially for younger people, feels to me like it's a very worrying state.
What are you saying?
Well, I think, we have a lot of people who for the first time in my career, I have people who have been out of work for months and months, and they are the kind of person who would have been snapped up at a moment's notice, if not already headhunters, chasing their LinkedIn profile before. And that's obviously very worrying. But I'm also hearing across a lot of organizations that, sort of junior talent programs are just non-existent anymore. Junior developers just don't seem to have a look in for any new open roles. And, it's strange because I would have always thought of, young talent, especially in this, because I think the way I see one of the things that AI has brought upon us is probably the biggest abstraction that we never asked for since, maybe compilers. I don't know. But it's this giant abstraction, right? Like we are not going to be coding. Or coding is going to become an increasingly rarer and niche activity. And, our ability to kind of share information backwards to the people who are, the younger generation are going to figure this out. And, they're going to probably run us all out of jobs at some point. And, I feel like there's nothing set up for us to feed back what we've learnt in a way to kind of help them do that without making too many mistakes along the way.
Here's the thing I think is really difficult about that, because on the one hand, I think we are running the risk of ending up with a generation of people that won't learn the basic skills of coding like we did. On the other hand, I'm not even sure I know what the basic skills of coding are going to be in the next few years.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to, I think, because it's all about what advice would you give to a young, somebody who's maybe thinking about picking up software engineering as a career. What advice do you give them right now? And I've always felt like the worst advice that was ever given to me was always came in instructional format. So, remember when I first wanted to become a software engineer, I didn't have a computer science background. I didn't do computer science at university. I did geology.
Oh, okay.
Start at the silicon was the idea there.
Yeah, but the world will always have rocks.
Exactly. And when I kind of joined a company, I decided I liked programming. I could do it 8 hours a day, which I couldn't do a lot of other jobs. And when I asked, the person at the company I was interviewing for, who was, I think they were maybe a VP or a senior developer or something higher, and I asked them, could I do it? Could I become a software developer here? They kind of said, they laid out their exact trajectory of what they did as instructions of how I should do it. Right. So,
yeah.
And obviously there's not just one way to get there. And I think they were mistakenly thinking, well, this is how I do it. I'm obviously successful, so that's how you do it. So instruction, step by step. Much better advice that's always been given to me has been in reflective, honest, what they learnt, what the context at the time, what they did, what happened, what they learnt. And I think that's the only advice that translates now, right? We can't give the instructional advice of learn object-oriented programming, learn Java, right? Learn functional programming. That advice isn't going to work. It's almost like we need to kind of say, well, I think I had a similar problem and this is how I solved it. And this was the context at the time. And, I think they're going to have to kind of work out how that works in the new world. But we're not done with our careers yet. We'll still learn something about how AI does work over the next couple of years, so we'll be better mentors by then, I'm sure.
Yeah, and we'll get more used to it. I wonder if the advice we need to start giving people is, do you actually like building stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I think crafting is always going to have a niche. Some things need to be very finely crafted, and I like crafting. There's always that part of the system that needs to have the craft. But I think the overwhelming majority of demand is going to be coming to the builders, right? The people who want to deconstruct a problem and use computers through AI to solve that problem in a really compelling and interesting way. I mean, a lot of that is kind of taking them out of the low-level craft of coding, which I guess is a shame because that has been so important to a lot of people for a long while. But it's going to take them up to the whole loop, right? How do you know the user wants it that way? Have you asked them? Maybe you can ask them and you can bake it into your agent's decision-making process.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to find that the craft changes not to how does it execute, but how well does it work for people. Because there's a lot of pleasure I've found with working with AI when you've got this machine that will tirelessly change the software for you, in being able to say, well, okay, now it works, but is it good? Does it feel good to use?
Well, I mean, so one thing, I'm just going to look up a term here because I think this is really relevant, right? So,
okay.
I don't know whether something that I've used a couple of times, and there's some people I'm working with who've used it, sort of convergently used it without us talking, and this new approach to building software that I'm seeing, whereas rather than kind of defining what you want to build and then laying down the programmatic sequence of things that need to happen to build it, right? The next level up, people are talking about like the dark factory, where you create create a repo with your agents and you create the skills and the guidance, and then you give it link to your backlog, and everything on your backlog gets done, right?
Yeah.
But you're still telling it what to do, right? The sort of level above that I see is this thing I'm calling like a high throughput evolutionary harness.
Okay.
Whereas if you can build the technology that measures what great means for your thing, right? Whether that's for my game at home, it's all about, at the moment, it's about performance, because I want to like it's an artificial life simulator, so it's all about little creatures crawling around, right?
Right.
And it's all about how many creatures I can get in there, and I've been trying to improve that for 20 years. I'm up to 1 million million creatures simultaneously at 90 frames a second in this.
Okay, yeah.
So
Good.
but for some people in algorithmic trading, it might be speed to react to information or trade, whatever. But if you can build the harness that can basically measure what good means, and then you can give it like the dark factory ability to actually create sustainable good features. If you basically hook the input to the features to the output of the measure, then you have a sustainable loop of like, well, it's going to improve on its own. Right? It's going to build itself.
Yeah.
Right? And I think your only limitation then is how fast the feedback loop is, right? So I've seen people build these sort of dark factory repos that will have agents that scan the market for what for other features their competitors have added, and will feed it back in as a feature request to implement it all the way through and come back out on their, without anybody ever kind of knowing that it did that, right?
Yeah.
Our application just created a new feature today. Well, let's have a look.
You've got to have a lot of trust in AI's ability to write code for that to work, but I can start to believe that we're going to develop that trust. It feels kind of sad that it means the value of a good idea is going to drop when it's so cheaply copyable.
Well, I think that was a good idea. I think if you think of coding as kind of building a shed or a house, then maybe. But if you think of it as tending a garden, then it's still a lot of kind of interesting engineering and thought and creativity gone into that. But it just means that you're not necessarily going to know exactly what comes out the other end. But I've seen that's actually true of very top kind of SaaS companies. The way that they, they don't define the features of what they're going to build for their product up front. They build one thing and they get that. They kind of create that hook, that loop with their users, and then that loop follow through a very smart set of product people who kind of work out is that right for our product? Should we build that? That loop guides them to where they get to. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily different. I think it's just almost there's more automation in that sort of idea. And you can always throw your ideas in there along the way, right? But it's subject to be tested and evaluated by the harness. So you might be disappointed if the AI's idea, comes out better than yours.
Yeah. Do you know what that makes me think of, though? Do you remember that? Was it Maltbook? So they had, they did like a Facebook for agents where they could all talk and post, and it kind of sort of descended into this chatterbox of nonsense. Yeah,
it went south quickly. But I mean, is Twitter or X.com any different? I'm not sure. I mean,
certainly in some places it's absolutely no better. But it sort of again raises that question of what do we need to know to make the best out of these systems? Because I don't think we need to know how to do individual lines of code anymore. But there are skills we desperately need to not have this turn into a pile of slop.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the models are improving enough that I would not say anything I say right now is going to be hold true in 3 to 6 months. But right now, you absolutely need to know good sort of best practice design patterns, what technologies and languages and frameworks are good for and not good for. Completely unattended, it still makes a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad choices. It doesn't seem to it doesn't seem to know its own sort of context limitations, like messy code and duplicate code still trips it up the same as it used to trip us up. But there are, it's just improving so quickly, and the community skills and tool sets and plugins and the models and everything are so growing that, I think there will come a point in time where it does most of the time make very good programming decisions. I think so. Right now, it does need a very experienced handler still, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I have to think about what the future is like when it really is just say what you want and it gets built. then the problem becomes, how do you know what to build, and who's good at that?
And I think we could all write a book, right? Like there used to be kind of friction in the way of maybe writing and distributing a novel, right? We could all do that right now online, but that doesn't mean we're all suddenly international bestsellers. So I think understanding, like, what are you going to do for who? Why will they engage with it? Why would they adopt it? Is there scale? I think all those things are still there.
And I think all software developers are going to need to develop a few marketing skills.
Yeah. I mean, everyone who kind of moved up to leadership levels and above had to kind of do that anyway. You had to have a very good kind of like a sympathy for the other parts of all of the things that actually delivers software, whether that's finance or product or marketing or anything. So I think that's going to be the case. And, I think the other danger, I think you hear companies talking about rolling out AI tooling as a strategic advantage, right? It isn't. It's a strategic advantage that everybody else can instantly have for a Claude subscription. So I think it's working out for companies anyway. Like, what are you best positioned to do with it? Right? What's your launch platform to add AI to that's very difficult for somebody else to replicate? Or what's your moat?
It can multiply your strengths and also pour oxygen on your fires at the same time, right? It's a multiplier.
Yeah, and you might be kind of lured into a false sense of sort of confidence that you can start competing on other companies' terms. Maybe we should start, providing, taxi services through an app, right? It's like, I think it's going to, you're seeing it a lot as well, a lot of people who suddenly realize they can create apps and they're getting apps onto the App Store and that's very good. But, everybody can do that now. Well, there's still a barrier to entry to AI to do that kind of stuff. And most people who are doing that stuff are still kind of doing it on the side.
Yeah. This reminds me of a kind of pair of questions I want to ask you. I'll ask the first. You must be seeing not traditional coders at work now building things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How much is that adopted? How well is it going? How much do people over or underestimate their capability?
Yes. Yeah. Everybody's building stuff now for sure. And, especially in the kind of like the project management, delivery lead, BA space, right? I think for their entire career, they're limited. Sort of the limitation on them is the capacity of their delivery team. Their software developers. So I'm just going to grab some water. So they've the best ones, I think, are kind of they're pulling in the proof of concept work to their realm, and they're better positioned to do that. The ones who are getting a little bit overconfident are then kind of jumping to conclusions and thinking, well, why can't we just deploy this? I've done it.
Yeah.
Most of them have already realized why that's a bad idea, because they then tried to add a second or third feature, and the second or third feature came out very wonky and they didn't know what to do about it. And then, everything started to kind of fall apart at the seams.
Are we going to have to start developing the skill of adopting vibe-coded, well-intentioned projects and refactoring them up into something production-ready?
Yeah, I think also some of these proof of concepts that they're building are very expensive. Like, they set off some agents running over a weekend, and you come back and you've spent a couple of $1,000s. And the business might rightly say, well, hold on a minute, I didn't want to spend a couple of $1,000s on that specific idea, I don't think that is a reason why people should slow down right now, because I think enjoy that while it lasts. But there is going to come a point in time where, the kind of the wire terp technique that I've kind of always used with clients before, where, although being fast is really good, sometimes just taking a little while not too long, but a little while to think about what you're going to build and being a little bit more accurate and a bit more pointed about exactly what it is, actually makes you faster at delivering value over time. So I think there will be a bit of some kind of funnel that kind of shows that, we still want to be intentional about what we're building and not necessarily just kind of spraying tokens at everything. but right now, it's a brief window of time to do that. So I tuck into the token maxing right now.
Yeah, we've got to develop some skills at using this ability freely before we start to think how we're going to use it well. There's always that phase in learning some new skill, right?
Yeah, everyone's just been given chainsaws, so, just let them kind of wave it around at their furniture for a little bit, and then,
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Eventually they'll learn to chainsaw sculpt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there'll be a bit of damage along the way, and, but that's just kind of the way it is, I think.
The other question I wanted to ask you, and this is kind of, I don't know if this is the mirror image or if it ends up being the same question, but that's sort of looking down and across the organization. Have you got any thoughts, experience, tips on how we deal with the way AI is changing the expectations from management?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a new phenomenon. It is something that happened that I used to experience before, especially for startups and scale-ups, is you will get someone who produces something that looks very phenomenal very quickly. And it used to be limited to, the kind of, there are a certain number, and I've been this person before, where we get very interested in solving a problem, and our brains will latch onto it, and we will work 24 hours a day or as close to that as we can. And the weekend, especially when we don't have families, and we will produce what looks like an incredible amount of software in a very short space of time. And they will mistake that for being, well, now I expect that of everybody. And that's not sustainable. And they learn that. Now, you're going to have a lot. That's just timed by 20x now, right? You're going to have a lot of people who get the Claude Mania to bring the whole thing back. They get a lot of people. It's not just techies. It's not just the builders. Not just the crafters. These people are getting the Claude Mania as well. You see them online, and they are going to produce things that look incredible. And I think a lot of people need a reminder that to kind of operate things and iterate on it and turn it into something that's sustainable is still a skill, and it takes practice and process and rigor. So I think everybody is going to be kind of showing off for a while, and you hope that kind of the senior leadership don't start to get overinflated expectations of what actually your workforce can actually take. I think burnout is going to become a real hot topic for the rest of this year and next year. The burnout from people that I think is going to be fueled by these expectations.
Yeah, sadly so. I think you're right, and I'm not sure if you have any suggestions on how we can navigate that, but I feel like I don't.
Well, I put a hammock up at the bottom of my garden, and I kind of force myself to go out there without my phone and lie there staring up at the sky for a while. But it's tricky, because it is exciting building stuff, and it's easier than ever to build stuff.
Yeah, and it's why we got into this industry for most of us, right?
Yeah. I don't have to decide whether I'm working on Clair, like the sort of the clairvoyant agent proximity system, or I'm working on my artificial light. I can do both. In fact, I've got both running behind as we're talking.
Yeah. And they'll probably be able to keep running while you go to that hammock.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, being truly single threaded. it's probably going to become a term, right? You know, being out and about, just in the moment, not secretly with agents running in the background. You know, I use my phone to check in on them as well.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we get signal on the Northern Line in London now, which is crazy.
Yeah, the underground.
So I'm creating pull requests, you know, through my Claude app on the Northern Line on the tube.
Yeah, I've done the same, and I think probably on that note, it says maybe we should go to the bottom of the garden, lie in the hammock, and avoid burning ourselves out for a little while.
But yes, so if it wasn't, 33 degrees in the garden, It's too hot for the hammock, but maybe I'll go and lie in front of the air conditioner for a bit.
Yeah, in this weather, it's literal burnout. But we shall have to see how the future unfolds and try and navigate it as best we can. For now, James Brown,
we can do.
Thank you very much for joining me in the present, and let's see how we navigate the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. We are all headed into that future together, so ready or not, here it comes. If you'd like to take a look at James's Clair project, you'll find a link in the show notes, as you may have expected. He's not publishing the Life Simulator yet, because there's a chance it's going to head to Steam, but if that happens, I'll let you know. Before you go, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do take a moment to like it, rate it, or share it, because it really helps other people find it. And if you enjoyed it, they might too. Make sure you're subscribed, because we'll be back soon with another episode. But until then, I've been your host, Chris Jenkins. This has been Developer Voices with James Brown. Thanks for listening.